Welcome to Work Made Easy, where we explore the transformative power of simplicity in driving positive action and unlocking your fullest potential.
Welcome to Work Made Easy, the podcast where we explore how to make work more relatable, seamless, and fulfilling. I'm your host, Parthajeet, and as a workplace consultant, I help companies shape better work and workplace experiences where people are happy to work, stay longer, and thereby help the business grow and succeed. Today, I'm joined by the one-of-a-kind Steven Puri, a former Hollywood executive who has also built and sold tech companies. We will explore how his journey through film, technology, and mindfulness offers fresh insights on staying focused, reducing stress, and creating a more fulfilling work life. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Parthajeet, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad you reminded me this is Work Made Easy because I'm doing the Work Made Hard podcast later, and I don't want to confuse the two. Very different.
Before we dive in, Stephen, I have to tell you, I'm a huge Hollywood buff, and knowing that you've worked on films like Independence Day, Star Trek, and Transformers, some of my favorites actually, I have to ask, if your career was a Hollywood movie, what genre would it be, and who do you think will play you?
That is such an interesting question. Okay, so my story is one that has very distinct acts, and I hope there are more acts to come. You know, I drive safely. I try not to cross the street with my eyes closed. Let's hope there are more acts to come. But the interesting thing is I started out, my father is Punjabi electrical engineer. So he designed chips for IBM. And my mom was a software engineer at IBM, a coder. They met at IBM. So the beginning of my life was very much about like, oh, you're in a family of engineers and, you're going to grow up and be an engineer. I would go down to the university with my mom. She was working on her master's in code, right? So there's this first act of, I think I'm going to be a coder. I think I'm going to be a code monkey. Then I get a scholarship to go to USC, and it has a fantastic cinema TV school. So a lot of my friends in the dorm are, aspiring filmmakers, writers, directors, that sort of thing. So I could hang out with them a lot. And then the first, act twist comes, which is I'm in LA when film becomes digital. Mm-hmm. And there was a very small intersection of that Venn diagram between people who could talk to an engineer and people who could talk to a director. And I happened to sit in that intersection. So I was invited to, hey, help us out, make this thing. You understand computers and blah, blah, blah. As you mentioned, it was a very fun ride for 4 or 5 years. We did the digital effects for Independence Day, won the Academy Award for that, set up a company with the director and producer of Independence Day. Super nice guys. We're all like, hey, let's work together some more. Sold that company 4 years later. Thought buying, building and selling companies was very easy because in your 20s, you think everything is easy, right? And so then this launched my second act, which is like, oh, let's go, do film stuff. This is super fun. Maybe become a chairman of a studio or a big producer. So started building that career. And, it's a lot of reading scripts. It's very different than coding, right? Suddenly it's all about relationships. Do you know writers? Can you get financing, things like that? So this is the second act. Pursued that, as you know, I'm a vice president at 20th Century Fox, executive vice president on the DreamWorks lot for Chris Minorsi, and worked on a lot of mainly summer action movies. So I did that, and I had a moment, like the heroes do in these little movies, where they have that like Jerry Maguire, where he holds up, the goldfish. He's like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I got to do something else.
Yeah.
Right? So I had this moment where I was working on Die Hard 5, and I'm like, this is such a terrible script. This is so bad. And it is going to get made simply because the projection show will make money. It could be black and white film and people show up. So as long as you make it cheaply enough, it'll go. And I was like, wow, am I going to wake up and be 40, 50 years old telling my kids, daddy's going to make Die Hard 9 today, to pay for your school. And that's when I decided to get back into tech. And there's another pivot, another sort of character turn where I was like, you know what? The thing I do know is I don't know the modern languages and the syntax of, React and Tailwind and Java, but I know the theory of it with the languages that I knew. And I could have agency. I can start a small company. I had some credibility in the space. So I started 2 companies, raised about $3 million for each. And it was much smaller. Like when we did Centropolis, raised about 15 million in venture for that. So these are smaller companies, took smaller bets. Neither of them worked. Got to maybe 50, 60,000 monthly actives. It's not enough for a Series A. It was an ego crushing moment. And I was like, okay, what have I learned? And, the hero sits and reflects, sits on the pier and looks out at the ocean and thinks about their life and the whole thing. And I was like, what have I learned? And the thing that I learned was a lot about how work works. And I'd seen horrible work experiences. And I'd seen really great ones. I'd seen what great leaders do and leaders that maybe need some improvement do. And so to answer your question, there are very distinct acts in my story. And in some ways, it's kind of a comedy. Like, I'd like to think it's maybe a dramedy. There's some, who knows, maybe it's an action comedy. I definitely like to be played by Meryl Streep. She's fantastic. There'd be an
That's a
honor.
solid pick.
So there you go. Not the answer you're expecting, but a fun one.
It did. This is quite a plot twist, actually. You transition from Hollywood to tech. Was there any kind of like a defining moment, Steven, that made you shift from producing movies to building workplace productivity tools and moving into this side of things?
There was one moment walking down a hallway with my boss, who was the chairman of Fox Filmed Entertainment. And he had been there 14 years, very successful guy. And when I'd come to Fox, the allure was, they said, listen, whatever you're making at DreamWorks, we'll double your paycheck and we will give you a bunch of franchises to run. So do you want to run the Die Hard franchise? Do you want to run the Wolverine franchise? Something like that. I grew up on Die Hard. I remember seeing Die Hard 1. I was like, oh my God, I could be the guy on the Die Hard. That was kind of cool. So they said, we want to bring in better filmmakers, better writers and directors. And at DreamWorks, I had, in a very fortunate way, worked with some of the top talent in the business. I mean, Steven has a very high quality studio. So you meet the best people in the business. So they're like, come here, we have a big check with this. So after like a year and a half there, I had bought a couple of like $1 million projects, like David Ayer's next movie. And, Chris McQuarrie was running Wolverine and this and that. And my boss only wanted to ask me about Die Hard 5. And it was such a terrible script. It was written by a guy who, after I left, he had been, he plagiarized another script in the Writers Guild, I think kicked him out. So I had inherited this project that, Bruce was attached to because he'd done all of them, the whole thing, right? And inherited this writer who was a very fun guy, not very talented. And I remember walking down the hall with my boss and I asked him flat out, I was like, I feel like I'm failing. I'm failing you. Like, you wanted me to bring you these high profile, like, movies with Billy Ray and Chris, these guys. And all you seem to be interested in asking about Die Hard 5. And it's the worst script I have. It is absolutely the worst project on my slate. And he's like, listen, it is a franchise. I'm paraphrasing this out. He's like, it's a franchise. Like, if you make it for under this number, our projections show this is what it will do. So just make it in front of that number. I've been here 14 years. I like my job. You like your job. Just come on. It's called show business. And I was like, wow, that was incredibly honest, incredibly cool of him to be like, straight up, here's the deal. I don't care. Got it. And that's when I started laying the groundwork to say, what could I do? You know what? I know engineering. Let's go build something.
That's so interesting. I feel like actually saying, okay, let's stop recording. Tell me more. You're letting out a lot of secrets.
Call me anytime with the time difference.
Yeah, I feel like asking you, how's the other Steven? So many questions in my mind. But just to kind of shift gears a little, Steven, film production, my exposure to film production and Hollywood is very limited. Recently, over the last month or so, I've been watching a series on Apple TV. You might be knowing which one.
I was at the premiere with Seth.
Oh, you were? Wow.
Yeah, it premiered here at South by Southwest. Yeah, so
Speaking.
I saw the premiere episode and then the episode where he goes on set and they're trying to shoot they're doing a one or like a single long shot.
Yeah, I mean, that's a funny kind of a series that
let me just tell you one thing. If you want to see what Hollywood is actually like, you should watch the series Entourage.
Uh-huh.
because the studio is just a funny comedy. It's not at all
Yeah.
how Hollywood works. It is just
Yeah.
a farcical comedy. The Entourage is the series that we would watch in the business with my friends, and we'd be like, "Oh, I've been in that meeting. I know exactly the meeting they're talking about, or I know what agent they're like making fun of." It was practically a reality show.
I know
Okay.
Hollywood is intense.
Mhm.
Was there any kind of like an absurd or hilarious maybe on-set experience which actually shaped the way you think about managing stress at work today?
Okay, really good question. And this is a pre-production experience, but I saw this several times and it actually informed a lot what I do now, which is as I've been running tech companies, I recognized that in the world the past 5-7 years, there's been this whole tug of war: return to office, remote work, hybrid work, work anywhere, distributed work. Like there's all this stuff going on in the world. Here's the funny thing: in film, it's been happening for over 100 years, but it's never called like remote work or hybrid work. Like films begin with writers writing alone, which you could call
Yeah.
remote, right? Every now and then they have a coffee or a lunch with a producer or something trying to sell their script. Then at some point you get a little traction and it becomes hybrid, where there's a production office set up. 1 or 2 days a week, you go in there, you meet with the costumer, the location scout, a line producer. Then you're on set and it is like RTO, full on return to office, $100,000 a day on set, right? Then it goes back to editors working in dark little rooms, and it goes back to remote at the end, right? So here's the funny thing. I noticed this happened first on Independence Day, and it happened again with Transformers. And it was one of those like mental tricks that I saw writers use that I wanted to incorporate into, my company now, the Suka. And what it is when we were Roland and Dean, who were the director, producer, and the writers of Stargate and the Universal Soldier and a bunch of stuff. So when they were going off to write this next one, they had always rented this Airbnb down in Puerto Vallarta. Supposedly this beautiful house that had like the light coming in the morning, and it was their creative space. And when they went and had their assistant, like it was a Thursday or Friday, like, okay, go rent the place. We have to go write the next big studio movie thing. She comes back and she's like, oh, it's rented this summer. And it was like a hue and cry around the office, right? So Roland calls his attorney, John Deemer, who's a fantastic smart guy. And he's like, John, buy that house. So John over the weekend buys that house. Monday they fly down there. I don't know what happened to the people who are renting it. Unclear exactly where they went, but they went down to have that experience of writing there. And I'll tell you a funny thing is Alex and Bob, who are amazing guys. Bob sadly just died a few weeks ago, but when they were writing, their writing process when they're young was very much that scrappy, we're in dorm rooms, we're like the young scrappy guys. So they would not go and rent like mansions in Puerto Vallarta. They rather had a very similar thing where when they had to buckle down and go right, they had their assistant rent a hotel room at the Universal Hilton. Not a luxury hotel, not that nice a hotel, but it felt to them, it triggered that thing in them. And what I noticed in doing this is that there are ways in which your mind starts to associate certain environments with certain kinds of work that you do. Like this might be my place for creativity. This other place with the letter here might be a place for like deep work. This other place, which may be a conference room or maybe a coffee shop, maybe a place for collaboration, And that was something I thought was really interesting that I witnessed firsthand these guys are getting paid $1, $2, $3 million a script. They know what they're doing.
Wow. You spoke about Suka. I think your company is called the Suka Company.
Yeah.
And I know, we've been speaking a lot about that. I guess it's about happiness from self-fulfillment, if my understanding is correct.
Very
Can
much so, yeah.
Can you break that down for me? What does it mean, and how can professionals integrate mindfulness into their daily routines without feeling, like the need to sit on a mountaintop in silence for hours?
Thank you for asking that. And of course, you know me, so I'm going to tell you a story to give you your answer, right? More
You're
fun than
such
this.
a fantastic storyteller, Steven.
Okay, I hope you enjoy this. So my wife, whom I adore, who is pregnant right now with her first child, we met in yoga because we both have a daily yoga practice. So now we've been together over 10 years. And if we're not on a plane or we're not sick, we have yoga practice together, right? So we got married a couple of years ago, and there were the early versions of this company where, as you mentioned, I saw a lot of lessons in film. I read a lot of the books by the smart people, Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and Cal Newport's work and Near's work, and like great guys have written and women have written about this. And I thought you could boil all this down and put it into a really simple tool because I procrastinate. I need this, right? So we had an early version that's working, and Laura and I go off on our honeymoon, right? Now, on your honeymoon, your whole company is like, don't bother Puri. He's on his honeymoon. Don't ask him to approve the staplers or do anything, right? So I was talking to Laura as we got to Bali, which of course, a lot of yoga. And I said to her, I said, you know what? These next 10 days, I realize it's going to be very quiet for me, which is very rare. And maybe this is like a gift from the universe where I can, let my unconscious mind sort of bubble up. Like, what is this company? I don't want to name it like Focus App 14 or, Focus Productivity thing. I was like, there's something about it, but I don't know what it is. Laura's like, okay, cool. We're basically going to do yoga and eat and sit by the pool. So you will have a lot of time to think. So I said, the first day, what I'd love to do is, if you're cool with it, I want to talk to a couple of like the early members of our community and ask them like, what's their favorite thing? Because maybe that will sit in my unconscious and bubble up something creatively, right? And I'd seen this work with films. So Laura's like, I'm going to the pool. Enjoy. Go have your Zooms. So I had a couple Zooms. And the third Zoom, I spoke to a guy who's still a member. I see him in our coffee shop. And I asked him about 8 minutes. I said, can I have 10 minutes of your time? And I'm very respectful of that. So I was like, okay. So we're 8 minutes in. I've asked all the questions. Oh, what's your favorite feature? Do you like the music? We have it designed this way. Do you like the task manager? Do you like the smart assistant that helps you break down your tasks, get your work done? And at the end of 8 minutes, I was like, you know what? I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And he said, Steven, you didn't ask the right question. And I was like, okay, well, what is the right question? He said, you should ask me, why do I pay you?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, I wasn't going to be that bold. But since you offered, hey, why do you pay me? And he said, at 3:00, I can be playing with my kids. Or at 6:00, I can say, where the hell did the day go? And the difference is, did I open Sukha in the morning? He said, that is what I pay you for. My kids are 2 and 4, and I want to see them grow up. I was like, wow, thank you. So, of course, I go to dinner with Laura that night. I'm all excited. I'm like, I spoke to this one guy who had this great way of talking about what we do. Yeah. I'm so excited, right? So Laura said to me, okay, that's really great. That's better than I've ever heard you describe what it is you do. So we're going to bed and brush our teeth. And she said to me, you know what? In yoga, we hear often, some Sanskrit words, these concepts like prana, and Sukha seems like that's actually closer to what you're aiming for, is that feeling of self-fulfillment, that feeling of ease. Like I'm very good at what I do. I'm doing the thing I'm meant to do. I'm executing my dharma. And she said, I think that's closer. And I was like, you know what? We're going to call it the Happiness Company. We're going to call it the Sukha Company. And that is where the name comes from. And that is our goal, is to help people say at 3:00, I feel great. My work is done. As opposed to at 6:00, I'll get this done tomorrow. I'll get up early tomorrow and get a jump on it, which I've told myself many times. So that's where I am with my life. And it's something I'm very proud when we have, our son in 6 months, to be able to say, this is what I do more than, I did the Wolverine.
I'm so happy to hear it, actually. Yeah, Wolverine. Well, I mean, it's like destruction to peace, mindfulness. It's quite profound, actually. And one of the things when you move towards this side of things, and when I think about our listeners and the kind of clients that we work with, we find that distraction is the usual villain, in people's work life. Notifications, meetings, emails. I mean, it's actually like an action sequence with no pause button.
Yes.
So if you had to think about some like really practical ways to be the hero and cultivate focus in a very busy work environment, what would those be, Steven?
Parthajeet, that's such a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. So there is something that I'll offer that is available for you as a leader to bring to your team, or for you as an individual contributor to do for yourself. And that is, and there's a wealth of research on this about flow states, which is to get to that point where you can look up and say, oh, I lost track of time. I got all of this done. I was incredibly focused. I didn't go to the bathroom. I didn't go to the fridge. I didn't, like fidget. And now I actually have a choice of what do I want to do with the rest of my day, as opposed to just dragging my work out of the entire day. And there are some conditions precedent that help you get into a flow state. And I'll give you a couple examples of these. These are ones where leaders can encourage their teams to do this, because if you get 3 hours of deep work out of one of your teams, I mean, that's powerful, right? As opposed to like 6 hours of meetings and Slacks and Teams and Outlook. And if you actually get 3 hours of like what they're great at, that is when you get that new module for your software, or you get that new blog post that attracts the attention, or you get the new ad campaign, because they was able to say, oh, I actually had time to go deep. So in my company, we block off 3 hours every morning from 9 to noon. There are no meetings. And there's no expectation that if I Slack someone or they Slack me, that there's going to be an instant like, oh, here's that file. No, that is the time for you to go to deep. Some of the things that help you get into that deep flow state, often music. And I know everyone has like their outlier. Like I have this one friend that can only listen to like 80s gangster rap or something, to get it. But I'll tell you, the middle of the road, and a lot of research is 60 to 90 beats per minute, certain key signatures, non-vocal, like rhythmic music, very helpful for just lulling you into that. And when you get in that flow state, and I don't know if you follow sports or arts, but you hear this. Well, okay, so you hear this quote, that famous quote by Michael Jordan about, at a certain point in the game, it's just me and the ball. He's like, there is no scoreboard, there is no spectator, there is no defender. When I'm in that zone, it's me and the ball. That's a flow state. That's all that is important to him.
Yeah.
Exactly. And same thing like Picasso, that great quote where he was like, I stayed up all night. I forgot to go to the bathroom. I didn't eat. But, by the way, here's Guernica. What do you think? Do you like it? And it's like, you look at some of these quotes and they all come down to the same thing. And when, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the Hungarian American, did research on this, he said, in many ways, it is about being carried along like a river. And he said, I'm going to call this flow. And that is one very applicable technique that I think is easy to fall away from if you're a leader, because you're like, oh, I need to have everyone instantly responsible. But if you actually hire well and you trust your people, you don't need them to be instantly responsible. You can say, hey, during this period of time, do the things that are going to move our company forward. Because guess what? Returning that email, that Slack, I bet you it's not actually going to have much impact on anything.
That's quite fascinating. Although I would think, from whatever little experience I have of working in change management in companies, is that this may call for a certain work process structure, and I think leaders have to be supportive of this as well.
Yes,
and I know that the film industry is kind of built on structure. You have story progression, you have a little bit of tension, and then
there's
resolution to it. Well, I know, as in a sense, I actually attempted to write a book, which is also called Work Made Easy, and I kind of picked up a few things on how to do storytelling. I mean, from your experience of the film industry, do you see any parallels between, let's say, storytelling in films and structuring effective work processes so that you actually get to that flow state?
Well, I'll tell you this, is if you think about if there's a genre of films that you like, it could be romantic comedies, it could be action movies, it could be horror, whatever it is, right? But you think about the genre is defined because it has certain traditional beats, right? In the rom-com, everyone jokes about there's the meet cute. Oh, this is where she walks out of the coffee shop and spills her coffee on the guy and looks up and it's like, oh, it's, whomever, right? In the horror movie, there's always the thing about, oh, there's the one character who seems like overtly sexual and they're going to have something happen to them. It's usually like this because there's that sense of retribution. So you have a lot of these genre elements that dictate how these things work. How that actually, for me, I've learned maps onto like work life is that, yes, there is there are a lot of people with strong opinions about remote work, hybrid work, in-person work. And what I've seen is that there are very appropriate times for each. It is not a binary, I must always be remote, I must always be.
Yeah.
like very much in film. Like when I, as a studio executive or as a producer, am working on a movie, there are times when like the writers, they need to be in deep work. They can decide how that happens, right? And there are other times when there is collaboration necessary. Like, hey, let's figure out like what the third act is not working. Why don't we get together to do that? Now, I'll tell you this: I've had many Zoom calls in my life. I've never had a Zoom call that fostered the same sense of collaboration as being in the room and just feeling each other and like that little excitement. I always liken it to like I could do yoga at home every day alone in my living room with an iPad, right? It does not compare to being in a studio of 30 other people who are all trying to do something. The energy is different, right?
Indeed.
So as a leader to say, oh, you know what, I understand, much like a movie, like there are certain beats of this. There is the, quarterly business review. There is the, Christmas party or the holiday party. Like there's certain things that happen in there. There's the goal setting, but to understand that each one of them has its own thing. Like a meet cute doesn't really happen remotely. It has to happen a certain way. And the same thing with like a collaborative experience versus a deep work experience. And that's what I think is really interesting is in film, because it's been done this way for so long. Before even the terms remote work and hybrid were a thing, they've always been doing remote work and hybrid. It's just naturally part of film. So when you think about that as a leader, you go, I understand how each era of this film, this project requires different sort of interaction. You become very almost intuitive about like, why don't we get together for this? And then, you know what, why don't you go off for a day or two? We don't need to talk. And then let's do a Zoom. And you get a sense of what's appropriate at each level. And your team feels it. Your team benefits because they're like, this feels strangely natural.
No, I completely agree that it is not a binary, but I still feel that a lot of people are still struggling with the uncertainties of where do I work from tomorrow? Where do I work from on Thursday? There used to be this 9 to 5 thing. The good
That
thing
is
about
true.
9 to 5 was that, well, I know that every morning I'll leave home at this time and in the evening I'll come back. So it was like, like a treadmill, so to say, that you set your foot
Yes.
on and then you get out of it in the evening. And I've seen and I've heard people say that if I have to go through this uncertainty of not knowing where I'm going to work from over the next, say, 1 month or tomorrow or day after, despite all the fancy gadgets and booking apps that I may have,
Exactly.
it leads to a bit of anxiety. It leads to a bit of stress. It leads to sometimes even feeling very busy without real progress. Are there
Very true.
any common obstacles you see, to feeling at ease in one's work? And how do you think we can actually overcome these?
I think at the core of what you're talking about is there's a certain amount of brain energy we have. We wake up in the morning, let's say we have 1,000 units of brain, right? If you burn 50 units, having to figure out, am I home? Am I in the office? What are the meetings today? Where it's, chaos. Those 50 units do not need to be burned. If you remember, there are a number of people who are famous, like CEOs of companies, founders, who wear the exact same thing every day for the simple reason they don't have to burn 1 unit of brain energy going, am I wearing a black turtleneck with black jeans? No, they don't have to think about that. Their entire closet, like even Zuckerberg did that more recently. It was like, I wear exactly this hoodie with this, t-shirt, this thing, and this great, he had, can't remember, it was like a $400 t-shirt he wore, that great t-shirt. But
I think
that
they
was
were
it.
all
It was like,
inspired by Hollywood because all the superheroes keep on wearing the same stuff all
this
all the time.
this is true. But that decision fatigue
Yeah,
of like, do I have to make
I
this
understand.
decision?
Yeah.
What you're
Mm.
pointing to is that kind of chaos is not necessary. If you
Yeah.
are a great leader, you go, here's a very understandable rhythm. So no one here is like burning brain energy. Where do I go on Thursday? No.
Steven, if someone listening today is feeling overwhelmed, and I hope not, at work and wants to
We
take
all do it
just
sometimes.
one
I
sip,
do sometimes.
it's okay to be overwhelmed.
Yeah. I procrastinate. Let's be honest. That's why I made what I made.
Yeah, so listeners, do not worry. Is there any one little thing that you think you can speak about to improve the focus and well-being just now?
Yes, I'll give you a very simple one. I know I've given you some long, like 2-minute stories. I'll give you a very simple one. I procrastinate. I notice in the morning that I have the instinct to, I'll just go to the fridge, or I'll just go do the dishes from last night, or I'll just put in a load of laundry. And I'd always start later than I should. And I looked deeply at that and I asked myself why, and it was overwhelmed. And there are a number of reasons we procrastinate. right? But this was a big one. And now, having spoken to thousands of members in our community, I realize how common it is. And sometimes it is as simple as this. You look at what you have to do, your task list in the morning, right? And either the first thing on there is so massive, you're like, I don't even know where to start. Or the task list is so long, you're like, I know I have to do 17 things. What's the point? I'm not going to get 17 things done today. It just feels overwhelming, right? And I'll tell you, for myself, how I solve that is in our platform. When you start your day, we have a smart assistant that helps you set up your work. It lets you choose 3 things, no more than 3. You have 3 things you can do, because guess what? The weird psychology, there's science behind this. Weird psychology is, if you have 3 things, you might do 3. If you have 7 things, you might only do 2. The exact same tasks, because it just seems achievable. Your brain goes, oh, I got this. And the other thing is, if you have, like, suppose you have your first task is like, write my next book, work made easier, right? You look at that, you go, oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to get that done today. So like our smart assistant will say, hey, Parthajeet, you know what? What if we had an achievable task for that first thing of outline the first chapter? I think you can do that in 30 minutes. And suddenly, oh, you know what? I could, actually when I was driving yesterday, I had a good idea for the first chapter. I could totally bang that in 30 minutes. And suddenly you're in your day. That is the one secret that I'll share, is that manage your task list in the morning to make it very simple and very achievable, and you watch the momentum grow.
It does not sound as much as work made easier, but more like life made easier. After listening to you, you've given some very interesting, teasers about the kind of work you do and about the Suka company. Steven, before I let you go, I mean, this has been such an insightful and fun conversation.
Super fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, but before I let you go, where can people learn more about the Suka company and the work that you do?
That is very kind of you to offer this. And I'll say 2 things. If anyone needs help in some way or has a question, or is like, oh, I want to read that book you referenced, they don't even have to be interested in my company. My email address is very public. It is steven@thesuka.co. So THESUKHA.co. Happy if someone wants to email me, say, could you send me a link to that book? Or what's that article? Or I want to read more about this. I'm here to help. If someone wants to actually try our platform, have the smart assistant help them get their work done, they can go to THESUKHA.co and try it for free for 7 days.
Wonderful, Steven. Thank you once again for taking out time for our podcast. Really appreciate it, Steven.
It was wonderful to be here. Thank you, Parthajeet.
And to our listeners, if you found today's episode valuable, do not forget to subscribe to Work Made Easy and share it with colleagues who could use a little more ease in their workday. Until next time, keep making work simple, seamless, and fulfilling.
Work Made Easy. The transformative power of simplicity in driving positive action and unlocking your fullest potential.